Hello, my friends, and welcome, welcome, welcome. Today, I have a very, very special opportunity, and I am so privileged to be hosting slash co-hosting today with my friend Lora Solomon. We're actually recording both of our podcasts simultaneously. So this is going to be super fun, super exciting, and something that neither one of us has done before. So we're jumping off the deep end here, and we're going to have some fun. We're going to talk about a topic that I think is extremely relevant and very important, especially this day and age. And it's something that I wish I had known when I started my practice, which is how to heal healers and how to really heal myself before I could go on a mission to heal my community and also heal the people that I deeply love and care about. So I want to do a quick introduction of Lora, and then she's going to introduce me, and then we're going to dive into this really, really timely and relevant conversation. So, Laura and I actually met at a conference in North Carolina many years ago. And it was really exciting because I could just sense her enthusiasm to serve, her enthusiasm to help people, and really to make an impact and make a difference. And Laura actually we got to know each other really well through a coaching program and a mentorship program that I run. And it's been fascinating and really rewarding to see her growth trajectory and really seeing her live her passion. So I'm going to read her intro real quick because I want to make sure that I don't miss anything in introducing her. So Laura is a family nurse practitioner, a mother, a teacher, a visionary, author, retreat facilitator, speaker, minister, and podcaster. With over 3 decades of experience as a healthcare professional and wisdom teacher, she shines a light on the role of survival programming on our health and human potential. Laura works with healers who are ready to become or ready to come into alignment with their healing gifts, fully embody them, and literally become the vessel for their unique medicine. She helps aligned healers kick the burnout that comes from overgiving and self-doubt to the curb and thrive. What an amazing, amazing, amazing role that you play in helping people and really helping people see the gifts that they have to offer. So thank you for joining me today. Thank you for allowing me and us really to co-facilitate and co-create an awesome conversation. Thanks for joining me today, Laura.
Thank you, Sachin. And yes, I think you had me at mushrooms when I met you at that conference in North Carolina. we first bonded over mushrooms, and then it was on from there. And I got Sachin's book right here, I think, and he was one of the people who inspired me to write a book, and because I was able to see the power that a book can have to kind of just bring that message so you can read it later. And because sometimes you go to a conference and you meet someone, you go home and you kind of forget, but I had this little jewel here, so I was able to dive into it more. And I'm going to also introduce Sachin. So Sachin is a father first and foremost, or maybe a husband first and foremost, right? Philanthropist, functional medicine practice success coach, and he has helped many functional medicine providers have more success. Speaker, author, breathwork facilitator, and plant medicine advocate. And he believes that the doctor of the future is the patient. And he has committed himself to helping others raise their consciousness, activate their inner doctor, and initiate their deepest healing through the use of lifestyle breathwork and respectful, of course, utilization of psilocybin. And he founded the Living Proof Institute, through which he pioneered a revolutionary approach to the patient-centered healthcare. And he coaches hundreds of practitioners around the world so they are empowered to deliver affordable and inspired care to their communities through his Perfect Practice mentorship, which I was in that for a few years, and it helped me tremendously. So I am very excited to have even more of a conversation about what's happening now in healthcare, because it keeps changing. We met pre-COVID, so it's a whole new world. And yeah, so where do we begin?
Well, I think it's important for us to acknowledge that, so many things are new, yet so many things remain unchanged. And I think that this past 2 years has really highlighted the things that need to change and where people's, programming has led them to, and perhaps even led them down the wrong path. So, this is going to be a very interesting conversation because we both really study the human psyche. I study the psyche through, not just helping people with breath work, overcoming, bad programming or toxic programming. I also study, the human psyche through marketing and how
Mm,
we communicate and how we're communicated to. So this past 2 years has really been a fascinating case study of the power of messaging,
yes.
and repetition and all these things, right? As you've probably witnessed yourself. And I'd love to know how you study the psyche. Maybe you can add some color there.
Well, I'm very much boots on the ground. So I can be in my head intellectual thinking, but what I always like to do is go for the really juicy stuff with people, like what's happening right now. What's showing up in your body right now? What is your body telling you right now? How are you breathing right now? Just going right into that, because the body is the truth teller.
Mm.
And so when we're in this place where we don't know what to believe, we were just talking about, there's so much you could believe, so many rabbit holes you could go down, and you don't know what to believe. The thing that I am always able to trust is my body. And as a healer and as someone who understands the body and works with the body, learning and really coming to functional medicine and integration and integrative medicine and all of that through my own illness and learning to trust my own body. For me, it always comes back to the body. Like what's happening in my body right now? What's resonating? What's the frequency here? What's going on? Is this expansive? Is this taking me to a more growth, a better place? Or is this causing me to contract and get smaller and to be afraid? Like what's happening in the present?
Yeah, I really love that. I'm going to invite you to expand on that a little bit, because some people listening to this are probably thinking, what is this voodoo mumbo jumbo, right? And
Okay.
the old me at some point would have even said that as well, right? So I want to
Yeah.
address the skeptics in the crowd, because
Okay.
some people may not be tapped into that, right? They don't know what it feels like to tap into their body. They don't know what it feels like to feel that expansiveness or that contractiveness. So how do you speak to that? And perhaps maybe you can share how you coach practitioners into feeling that, because I think that when we're trained in rogue memorization. We're trained in, this is the way things are, and we're not really trained to feel. So how do you
Yeah.
get practitioners to go from thinking to feeling? I'd love for you to speak to that.
It's not easy. And I know it's not always easy for me either, because I feel safer in my head, and safer in the world of ideas and thoughts, and let me intellectualize things. So first I acknowledge, hey, this is not easy. It's not going to be what comes probably very naturally. But it's really an invitation. And for a lot of people, the invitation comes through some symptom they're having. For example, I'm working with a practitioner now, and the way it's showing up with her is a lot of stagnation in her lymph tissue. So through a process, through conversation, for her, it's literally fear and shame as an energetic frequency that is stuck in her body. Like that's where she has stored it in her body. And so connecting those two for her. And then the next step is, what are we going to do to start getting that to move again? Right. And it
Mm.
could be breath work. Breath work is one of the best ways to start to get the lymph tissue to move again. And then jumping on a trampoline. So it gets us out of just talking about things, because understanding things intellectually is good, it's fine, but it doesn't move things in the body the way things need to be moved in the body. And all of this, is stored in the body. So, adrenaline, the cortisol, like all of these things that are supposed to move and need to move. And that's where I think a lot of the healthcare system, you have your psychiatrist, your therapist, and they're all talking, and it's all talk therapy. And then you go to your, regular doctor, and they talk about what's going on in your body. And we're acting like those are not both happening at the same time, and that they're not
Mm.
connected. So bringing them back, I'm like, yeah, those emotions are stored in your body. That's not just a psychiatric issue.
Yeah, my mentor Joe Polish always says that the issues are in the tissues.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And there's nothing more truth than that, right? Our
Mm-hmm.
emotions physically manifest as, pain, or they might manifest as stagnation. And I
Yeah.
know that different emotions correspond with different organ systems in the
Mm-hmm.
body, and that's important for us to pay attention to.
And I don't think it's a mistake if you think about what COVID has been. It's really been a heart and lung, and it's grief.
Mm.
It's collective grief that this is an opportunity for us to move through. And, nobody really likes to be invited into grief, but it's part of, evolving and moving to wherever we're going as we, hopefully are evolving through this process.
Yeah, so let's speak to that a little bit. So when and I totally get that when you say grief, um, people don't know how to grieve, right?
It's true.
It's like something that people, really deeply struggle with. So what do you feel from your perspective? What are people actually grieving? Are they grieving their potential? Are they grieving like maybe they didn't love their job or their career choice? Like what are they grieving exactly?
Well, first of all, I think we do know how to grieve. I think we're born knowing how
Mm.
to feel all of our feelings. But we learn very quickly that some feelings are okay and some are not. And then once we lose that, then we don't know how to do what comes very naturally. If you raise the child has no problem feeling all the way through all of their feelings and moving through the other side of it. They go through grief, something happens and they move through it. So we do know, we just get so smart that we don't let ourselves, so let's say you're a man like you, Sachin, and you learn that it's not okay to cry, right? It's not manly to cry. You don't do that, right? Or if you're a girl and you learn it's not okay to cry, or it's not okay to be mad. So now you're just kind of stuck because you can't process through the full spectrum of what needs to happen for that to move through. So a lot of it is just giving ourselves permission to feel normal feelings. It comes down to something that's so basic and simple, but even myself to this day, like I will like feel like I need to cry and fight it and not let myself do it. But most people will say they feel better after they let themselves cry. They just kind of let it out and then they feel better. Right.
Yeah. And interestingly enough, like crying is a form of breath work.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm laughing too.
Laughing as well. Yep. Good belly laughs are overdue for a lot of people, I'm sure, listening to this. I was at the cottage with a friend of mine and we were just on the ground howling, laughing our butts off. And it felt so good, to be able to do that. And, as you're speaking and you're talking about, just releasing these emotions, the word play came up for me. It's like either we can release, right? Like let go, or we can release, which is we just keep holding on to it.
Oh,
right?
yeah. I
We're just
like that.
Leasing these things.
Least like tethered to it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And and we're not letting go, right? So there's that too. And I find that, a lot of chronic illnesses are associated with unprocessed, sometimes not even unresolved, but unprocessed,
yes,
experiences that we've had. And, before we started recording, you said something that I thought was really cool, which is you don't like to refer to it as trauma. You like to refer to it as programming. So let's talk about that a little bit. I'd love to hear your thoughts and distinction there.
Yeah. So I just wrote a book, which is one of the reasons why I reached out to you to have this conversation, because I wanted to share that with you and talk about it. But the name of the book is Wounds to Wisdom. And it's not a very long book, but in the book, I use my story, which has been dealing with trauma and overcoming programming and my own illness and things that I had to work through, to demonstrate really how this gets caught in the body. And, I didn't want to believe it myself. And I certainly didn't learn in school that that unprocessed trauma gets stuck in the body. But if you think about yourself as, and I talk about in the book as a biotechnology, which I think we are. I think we are a very intelligent code, and we are coded. We come with survival code built in because we have to survive. Like everybody comes, but with the survival code ready to go. And we will do whatever we need to survive, which means we will believe what our caregivers tell us about who we are and the way the world is made. Like that's not optional for a child. You are going to believe what your parents tell you. And then at a certain point, and if you have, fairly healthy parents in a good situation and a healthy community, most of that program is good and then naturally leads to you becoming your best version of yourself, right? If not, if there's some kind of programming about it's not safe to be yourself, or you're not worthy, or you're not safe, and all of these other programs, then that's when it starts to come in and you literally become self-destructive. This is not conscious. So all of this programming is not conscious. Nobody consciously creates illness in their body, right? But it's a destructive pattern that's going on because of that unconscious programming. And so when you see the symptoms, you're like, okay, what's happening here? And then you can start going from that place and getting a program upgrade, because your program, your real program is to thrive and to expand and evolve. And so that's where I think you asked earlier, like, what are we grieving? I think it's part of it is that we haven't been able to live up to our potential. I don't know who we can blame for that other than ourselves, but I think on some level we know that we are capable of more than we have been able to step into.
Yeah, the human potential is remarkable and scary at the same time.
Yeah.
Right. It's like a rocket, right? It's like amazing that we can blast ourselves off into different parts of space, but it's scary as well how much power we can wield.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing that you mentioned, and something that I speak of frequently as well, is this programming that takes place primarily between the age of 0 and 8. And Bruce Lipton
Yes.
talks about this in his
Mm-hmm.
book, The Biology of Belief.
Mm-hmm.
And it's sometimes hard for us to accept the fact that maybe the unconscious programming that we have was done unconsciously.
Yeah.
Right. And it's not our parents intentionally trying to damage
No.
us. They love us, and our guardians, for the most part, I would say for 99% of the case, like our parents are doing their absolute best.
Yes.
And their programming and their parenting skills and their language and their coding was coded into them.
Exactly. So who are you going to blame? You start blaming people, and who are you going to, where are you going to stop?
Right. Exactly. Right. And then you can't be mad at the people that made it possible for you to be alive right now. Right.
Exactly.
So you can't go back hundreds of generations and be like, well, darn it. We really have to wake up to this fact. And I think that collectively as a society, at least in the West, we're starting to wake up to, this reality, right? It really is a reality. And maybe in the East, they've been, acknowledging some of this far longer than we have, but in the West, it's becoming far more recognized. And, people like yourself are helping people work through and move through some of this programming and recode and rewrite their story.
Without judgment, without shame, but it's a reality. Let's just accept that out of our need to survive, we were programmed, and let's just not fight with that anymore. Just accept it. And now what's the programming? And you can just look at your life and see what your programming is. It's evident. There's no mystery, right? You've created basically based on your program. Okay. And then is this what you want? And then it completely takes you out of any victim, right? There's no more victim. It's like, I've created this, and do I want to create something else?
Yeah, I love that. And it's never too late, right? To create whatever reality you want.
And I think one of the things we've talked about is healers, right? So a lot of there's the archetype of the wounded healer. And, when I was working with people with psilocybin and working with other healers, I use that framework because, first of all, I think it's very empowering to see your wound as, I like to say, it's like your baggage is your unpacked gifts, right? So what's in there? Let's go into that and see what's in there. And a lot of healers, myself, I'll put myself at the top of that list. I became a healthcare provider, a healer, out of not feeling good enough. And if and when I save somebody, I know that I've never saved anybody, but there's this kind of savior, I'm going to come in and help you and be the one, right? Then I'm going to be okay. Then finally I'm going to be okay and I'm going to be worthy, and then I'll get to be happy. But then what that led me into, which happens for a lot of healers, is this burnout, because you're overdoing, overgiving, caring more about another person's health than they do at the end of the day, which never works, right? And then also perpetuating this, like, I'm here and I'm going to rescue you and save you, which, as you say, that the doctor of the future is the patient, right? So it's a shift in, like, I'm playing a role here, but the role that I'm going to play is I'm actually going to be the medicine. I'm going to heal myself. That is what I have to give. I'm not going to heal you. I'm going to be healing, not heal. I'm going to be healing and then bring that to you. And that is the shift. Even if someone comes out of mainstream healthcare, right, and they're into functional medicine, and I saw this in myself, it's like, okay, the ammunition has changed. We're using supplements now, and we're using all these, maybe hormones or all these different things, but there's still this idea that you're broken in some way and I'm going to fix you. Right?
Yeah, that paradigm is very fascinating to me because
Yes.
it does position the healer, in this case, for lack of a better term, as the savior, and it always has to position the patient then as the victim.
Yes.
And one of the frameworks that I just recently learned and have been teaching people is positioning the client as the hero in their story, and positioning ourselves as the sage, right? The sage is somebody who can provide profound, simplicity and wisdom and provide
mentorship,
presence and mentorship. Exactly. But, their goal is to see their student thrive, right? And to see the student or the client or the patient, become the hero in their own story.
Yeah.
Instead of being the victim and always having to be saved. And so our current medical system is very much set up that way, right? And that's why, there's a lot of synergy in our messaging, because my message is, let's make the doctor of the future the patient, right? Let's put them in the driver's seat of their health and make them the doctor who's going to heal themselves, because our body has that capability, our environment, our relationships, our food, all of those things, all of those facets of our life have that capability for us to really thrive as a self-healing organism. Yes. And that isn't to say that there isn't a time and a place for, medical interventions, because, at some point we're all probably going to need them if we haven't used them already. But there's so much that we can do for ourselves that we're not being potentiated to do for ourselves, because we've positioned ourselves as the victim in our entire life, right? Not just in our health, but in our financial situation, in our,
political situations,
political situations. Exactly. We've positioned ourselves as the victim. And in that framework, we are, we're always looking to be saved. And when there's no one that's going to come and save you, which is what these past 2 years have demonstrated, then we feel totally lost. And so maybe that's part of our grieving process, is to grieve the death of victimhood and really embrace, that we are much more powerful than we've been led to think.
Right.
And there's so much that we can do for ourselves and birth that new version of ourselves.
And also, maybe for healers, grieving the loss of saviorhood. So now my identity is not going to be wrapped up in finally feeling good enough when I save the world or I know making that sound very grand. So it's not necessarily that grand, but if I get honest with myself, I'll get into, I try not to do this anymore, but get into a relationship where I find myself feeling resentful because I'm giving so much and they're not, doing what I asked them to do, or, and now they're still complaining. And it's like, well, you're not doing what I asked. I'm sure this never happens to you, Sachin.
Oh, of course not. Of course not.
But, so it's like, okay, wait a minute. Where have I stepped across the line? And my identity now and my self-esteem is attached to how well they're doing. Right. And if they're healing. So I feel like that's the part that healers, would benefit from bringing into consciousness. It's one of those things where maybe in medical school or nursing school or wherever we went, it was, I don't know, we were just kind of brainwashed to think that's the way you're supposed to be. Right. And you're not supposed to ever have any of your own feelings or get sick yourself or have your own needs. You're just there for the patient and the client, and you're the hero on the white horse, and that's who you are. And yeah. And so there's some grief around giving that up.
So I have a question for you.
Yes.
I know you've worked with a lot of practitioners and helped them facilitate this process of grieving and healing and really repositioning themselves. So I don't want to make any assumptions. I know where my story may start, but I'm curious, before I share that, where do you feel like this positioning starts for practitioners? Is it something that was said to them at a very young age? Is it something that happens in medical or healthcare school training? Is this something that happens when they're in practice? Like, where do you feel like that perspective of I need to go out there and fix everyone starts?
I think it starts before the age of 7.
Okay.
Yeah. When I work with people and I really get into where do these core beliefs come from, oftentimes before the age of 3. There's some situation where a parent or a sibling is not doing well for some reason, and this individual, not consciously, because they're young, but makes a decision: when I grow up, I'm going to fix this. And they make that decision, and then they carry that with them. And and there's almost this desperate need to, now, depending on how dire the circumstances, that wound could be really, really deep. I'm working with someone now whose mother had a severe mental illness to the point where she was hospitalized when my client was really young. So for her, it was it's very deep, this wound of this, I've got to fix my mom or I'm not going to be okay. So it's a very deep, terrifying type, place. That's probably not the same for everybody, but there is something that drives a healer to be a healer, and it's not money. Usually, there's some deep, I want to make the world a better place. So it's not, I'm not painting it all to be all bad, because I think it's both. It's like, I want to make the world a better place, but then there's also this, I'm not okay until I do.
Yeah. And, if I had to pinpoint, and I know sometimes it's, some of these things could be pre-verbal, right? So we may not even be able to verbalize, what happened to us. But I distinctly remember when I was younger that it felt like nothing was ever good enough. And I think that was my parents' way of motivating us. And maybe that was the way my parents were motivated, especially my dad. Because I know, like, he always has wanted what's best for us. He always wanted us to thrive. He always wanted us to do well, be good citizens of this planet. And his way of motivating was, of motivating us was, hey, like, it's not enough, right? And so I remember getting a 98 in a course once, and his first question was, where's the other 2%? What happened to the other 2%? And so that can be, something that always, so now when I see something, I always see the things that are wrong with it first, not all the things that are right with it. And in some ways that served me, because as a consultant, that's what people hire me to do, and is find out what's wrong with something. So there are times where some of these things can serve us, but there are times where, hey, it's never good enough, right? So you're never satisfied. There's never any celebration. Like, people are like, oh, you should go and celebrate that. And I'm like, what exactly am I celebrating? Like, I'm just getting started, and so I can definitely see how that shows up for me at certain times. And I can see how that served me, but I can also recognize now, after having done some work, where it doesn't serve me, and then making a conscious effort to kind of break that pattern.
Yeah. Yeah. And you make a good point, which is that if these character traits, or whatever we want to call them, were all bad, it would be so easy to see that's all bad, but they serve us. Right. I mean, I can see so many aspects. I mean, would I have done all the things that I've done and pushed through so many things if I just didn't have that desire? So it does serve. It's almost like it's something that serves, but then can become self-destructive at some point. It's the same exact thing.
Yeah, it's like a double-edged sword, right?
Yes, yes. And it's also, when I work with practitioners, it's their unique medicine. There is something about that wound that is unique, that you can channel that medicine through that wound. So as the medicine comes through your wound, it heals you, and then it becomes a gift. And that's what I'm getting chills just talking about it, because that's what I see happening for people that I work with. And so then they become the authority, and there's no competition, because nobody has your medicine but you. I mean, I think that's so cool.
Yeah. Are you familiar with Tim Grover at all?
No.
So Tim Grover was Michael Jordan's coach. He was his first personal athletic coach.
Not a very athletic person.
But I think you'll appreciate this. So he coached like Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan, the most elite athletes in the world. And one of the things that he refers to is their dark side.
Yes.
And so that's reminds me of exactly what you're saying, is that wound is kind of that dark side. It's that unique gift and capability that we have, that if channeled correctly, turns into our gift.
Your brilliance, your genius, it's there. Yeah.
Yeah. So how do you help people find that? I'd love to learn more.
Well, I use the hero's journey as a framework. And so we start with that, because like built into the hero's journey, you go into the cave. That's when you go into, so you don't start there, right? In the hero's journey, there's the call to action, the meeting the mentor. You go through your I'm trying to think that the gifts. I can't believe I can't remember all this off the top of my head, but you eventually make it to the cave, right? And in the cave, you seize the sword. So that's where you have the battle, you seize the sword, and then you bring it out, and then you have a final battle, and then you gradually bring your gift home. So that's like the whole arc of the hero's journey. So I use that, and then I take people through the energy centers in the body. And while I'm doing that, I'm asking very specific questions about their relationships, their life, and their body. So how beliefs and programming shows up in different parts of the body. For example, in the first energy center, that's where people will have beliefs about money and safety and security. So if someone has they never have enough money, or they get some money and they can't hang on to that, or for some reason, so if you start to see that, then there's something in the first energy center. So, and then I just work through the energy centers, and as I'm doing that, one of the first things I teach people is breath work. Because as they're going into and looking at this darkness, this dark side, then fear comes up. So there needs to be some tools and resources to stay present and to not go off into the default programming. So it's that. And I created a course of self-study. So I have it all in that. And then I also work with people one-on-one. Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
So speaking of one-on-one, do you work
Yes.
with people in person? Is it remote work? How does that work?
It's remote. Yes. I mean,
Right.
for the most part, yes. Because I'm at the beach, but anybody can come see me at the beach. I'm happy to do it out on the paddleboard or the kayak. And
let's speak to that just a little bit, because again, before we started recording, you mentioned that in your yearbook, if I'm not mistaken, you were the person most likely to have their own private island.
Now, I said my wildest dream. So I grew up in New Jersey, and I actually belonged to a very strict religion. So I had to wear a dress every day. Mm. So standing out at the bus stop in my dress in January in New Jersey, I used to fantasize about the tropics. So I wrote in my yearbook that my wildest dream was to live in a tropical island. And now I do.
Amazing. Isn't that cool? How that comes to fruition?
Yes. I mean, I have a grapefruit tree outside my window, and yes.
Amazing. So speaking of healers, if someone is unhealed, mm-hmm. right, or wounded, as you would put it, how does that show up in their practice? How does that show up for their patients? How does it show up in their practice?
So glad
how does that
you
show
asked me that.
In their life in general?
Yes. And I'm going to talk about myself, because I'm like case number one and still continue to be. I'm not putting myself outside of this, but someone might get into a great mentorship like yours, Sachin, and you're giving them all the tools, all the resources, all the support, right? It's all there. And they just can't implement it. It's like they can't get out of their own way, right? And so it's like, oh, I just need a better website, or I just need to hire this person, or I just need to hire that person. So there's all this external, right? Let me put that in place and that in place and all this doing, but there's still this wound there. I'm thinking of one person in particular that I worked with that he had a lot of guilt over some past life choices. And that guilt was creating a lot of pain in his body. So that was a distraction. And then he kind of was just not being able to get any traction. I see that a lot. It's like a lot of wheel spinning, a lot of doing, a lot of distraction, like working at it and just not getting any traction. I see that. Or, people not being willing to charge, so it can show up in that way. So that sense of not being worthy, can show up it can show up as in many ways as we're unique individuals, right? A lot of drama, a lot of conflict. So a lot of just extra stuff happening, like, oh, I'm making progress, and now there's this big blow up over here. And so, that happens to everybody. Life happens. But when you see this, it just happens over and over and over again. You realize that there's some kind of unconscious creating all of that. I apologize for the noise. Can you hear that?
No, it's fine.
They're doing some work in the street. Well, hopefully we can edit some of that out. But
it's all good. We can't hear it. Actually, I had a tree in front of my house that was being, I guess they were coming in to do the, 5-year maintenance on it. So I could totally appreciate, working from home, the beauty of working from home, right? There's always action going on.
Yes, that's true. Yeah.
So I feel like, we talked about how it shows up for practitioners, right? And one of the things where it can show up as you mentioned, is charging too little, right? Yep. So we devalue ourselves. Our self-worth becomes low. Sometimes maybe we have unrealistic expectations of our clients, right? Because we had unrealistic expectations placed on us. Sometimes perhaps we set too much of our self-worth in our clients' capabilities of complying to the protocols we put them on. And that can lead to, self-sabotaging behaviors or kind of questioning ourselves. And you mentioned something that I think is very relevant, because some people think that they're just one funnel away, right? We've all heard that
Yes.
term, right? You're one funnel away. But that may not be the case if you've got some unresolved stuff and this inner dialogue that isn't serving you. And sometimes people will use these websites or, hey, I need to take this course or this training as a way of unconsciously telling themselves they're not enough and they don't
Right.
have enough tools or experience to help others. But that's probably a sign of their story that's showing up for them and not serving them anymore, because you and I both know that, all of us have enough to offer, right? And
Yes.
especially if you even take one weekend training in functional medicine, you have enough knowledge to offer people over the course of an entire year,
Yeah,
right?
it's true.
You could read a book and share the snippets and takeaways from that book, and you have enough knowledge to offer people, millions of people all over the world who haven't read that book or haven't taken that course or haven't,
Right.
listened to the podcast you're listening to. But we just feel like we're not enough for a variety of different reasons, as you mentioned. And that's what holds us back. And then we end up procrastinating, joining this program or taking that training or, flying halfway around the world to learn something that, dies inside of us because we never get rid of the things that are holding us back from
Yeah.
expressing
I mean, and
expressing our
I'm
gift.
guilty of all of that. That's how I know it so well, Um, one other thing I want to say about that, as we hopefully are evolving and understanding that it's all about frequency, right? It's all about energy. Basically, our frequency is our currency.
Mm.
And so this, you know, what we're doing, what we're about as healers, it's 90% frequency. It's 10% technique. And I think we get into it's 90% technique or 99% technique, and maybe somebody might mention frequency in there, and that's 1%, and it's backwards. And I feel like that is also where the future of healthcare is. It's that the healthcare practitioner needs to show up, in a different way for themselves first, of course, and then as an overflow for who they're serving. And then the other piece I'll say is there is a fear I see of, and maybe this is more with women than with men, of really standing in their authority. It's like this tall poppy syndrome, don't be too bright, don't be too light, don't be too much, don't be too loud, don't say you really know something, don't say that you really have something of value to offer, because something bad could happen. So I don't, maybe that has happened in your lifetime. Maybe somebody said you don't get too big for your britches or that kind of thing. But we really need to, as leaders and visionaries and way showers, be willing to stand in an authority and speak out and say, there's a better way to do things. And when there's that fear of, I'm not safe for some reason, for something that happened as a child when maybe you really weren't safe, I see that holding people back too. And there's not really anything I can do to, take that away for somebody, but just bringing it into consciousness and saying, yes, you're going to do that. And yeah, you're going to put that Facebook Live out there, and it's going to feel terrifying because you've put yourself out there, right? It's going to be scary. And just say, that's just the way it's going to be. It's going to be scary, but get over yourself.
Yeah.
It's like, it's not about you. And that's another thing the biggest thing about the hero's journey, I say, is it's all about you. It has nothing to do with you, because your medicine is not about you.
Yeah.
It's not about you. It's like never has been about any of us individually.
Yeah. One thing is that once we realize that our message is so much bigger than the messenger,
Yes.
then that I find can be helpful for people. But of course, we've got to acknowledge these limiting beliefs and these stories that are holding us back. And so how can people do that? So how do people get a hold of you? How do they connect with you? What's the best way for them to start that journey in investigating the process with you?
Thank you for asking, Sachin. I have a website, it's lorasolomon.com. And my book, Wounds to Wisdom, is on Amazon. So if you, that is an abbreviated version taking you through the process. So that's a, like I said, a version of it, but that's, in my course of self-study and working with one-on-one, it goes much deeper, much broader, but that's a snapshot of what it's all about. And writing that book, as I go into a lot of very personal stuff in that book. And that was my exercise in realizing it wasn't about me, and I will say for sure, the book has only been out for 3 weeks, but the best part of writing that book has been people sharing with me how much it resonated with them and how much they got out of it. And it really affirmed that it wasn't about me, and it was okay to put that out there. But yeah, I would lay awake at night saying I would be terrified. 2 things. One, that somebody was going to read the book. And 2, that nobody was going to read the book.
What a paradox.
I was like, okay, I'm messed up, but I'm going to keep writing anyway. Yeah. I don't know if you had that when you were writing your book, but it was a terrifying experience for me.
Well, I think it definitely is, because when you share your story, people don't get to see that side of you. They don't get to see the ugly reality that at least I had to go through, to, I don't want to say get to where I am, because I'm still going, right?
To be where you are.
To be where I am now. And yeah, people don't see that, right? And a book is a great way to, to take people into your life and show them, hey, this is where it started, right? And I think that makes the whole process and makes us individually a lot more relatable. And it's that relatability when people can see their story in your story.
Exactly.
Then they know that you understand them. And that's what people want, right? Like they want to feel safe in your presence. They want to feel like they can express themselves. They don't have to hold anything back. They're not going to be judged because you're creating a safe container for them. And, not a lot of people are willing to share that part of their lives and that part of their story. And unfortunately for them and for the people that they can impact, they'll never be able to impact those people, because what I've learned is that what people crave is safety. They want to feel safe. They want to know that you understand them and that in your presence, they're safe to be exactly who they need to be and exactly who they are, so that they can release some of these things that are, not serving them anymore.
Yeah. And to become who they want to become, like that's another thing too. I mean, it's like to be like, even if I become bigger and better and more awesome, you're still going to love me.
Right. Amazing.
Yeah.
Well, Laura, this was a fun experience.
Yes, it was.
Interviewing each other. That was pretty cool. Thank you for allowing me to do
wait
that.
a minute. We gotta say how people can find you.
Oh, sure. Thank you for asking. So it's a couple of ways. One is they can go to Perfect Practice Mentorship. So if they're a practitioner listening to this and they want to, find a heart-centered community, just like Laura did, where we invite growth and we invite these type of conversations. It's not all about funnels and websites. I mean, there's definitely that in there, but we also try to create a container where, people can heal themselves and therefore they can heal others. And then if they want to learn practical health tips, they can go to 30in30.org. And it's 30in30.org. And that's where I share 30 of my best tips on how people can start and facilitate their own, physical healing and transformation. There's definitely an emotional and psychological transformation. And I think that you're in great hands with Lora for that part of your journey. So thank you for this opportunity to share.
Thank you, Sachin. And I can say I learned so much in that mentorship, and I can't imagine going on this journey without that support. I wouldn't recommend anyone try to do that. So yeah, check Sachin's work out. And
Thank you. The
Awesome.
pleasure and honor is mine.
All right. Should we stop the recording?
Well, let's do a quick outro. So thank you everyone for tuning in. So much gratitude for you and Laura and our listeners. Appreciate all of you for continuing to work on yourselves and, showing up in the world as a bright light for your clients and your patients. So
yeah,
thank you and have an amazing, amazing, blessed day. And instead of releasing your challenges, release them and let them go. Have an awesome day. Thank you, Laura.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.